Hello, my friends in gaming. I am SigTrent, game designer, co-creator of Everyday Heroes and Salty Sea Dog for SigTrent Games. I'm going to tell you about what's going on with SigTrent Games this week, give you a little bit of game design advice, and talk about my life and gaming in general. So this is week 41 of SigTrent Games, and there's a whole lot going on right now, so let's get into it. Shotgun Fantasy, the editing is all finished. Eric has finished editing the book, and I've made a few changes, based on his editing suggestions that I think have improved things a little bit. So it's looking really nice. I've got the final manuscript sitting on my hard drive and up in the cloud. So we're ready to go on that. So the next step for me is to go through that manuscript, identify the places where I think I absolutely need to have some illustrations beyond the ones that I commissioned specifically for the book, and then go out and grab images from available, not clip art, I always forget the name. Anyway, stock art, there we go, that I want to purchase in order to put into the book in those locations. So we'll pick something out that matches the style of the art that we've already got, more or less, and the themes of the book, which are mostly fantasy and isekai play, and hopefully we'll get some cool stuff going on there. The isekai illustrations will be a little harder to find, but I did find a couple of artists that mix fantasy genres with other genres, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So that should be pretty cool. It will be not a heavily illustrated book, especially the initial version of it. We may be doing another version of Shotgun Fantasy for print later on that includes a set of basic rules so that it can be a standalone product. Because I think if we're going to print the book and get it out into stores and distributors, then they're going to want something that they don't have to buy another book in order to play. It'll still be Everyday Heroes system incompatible, but we'll include just sort of a subset of the core rules that can go along with that. But that's plans for future time. Right now, Shotgun Fantasy is a supplement, and that will be a PDF product initially. And so we don't need quite as heavy art. But I always like art, and I want stuff to be inspiring and spark the imagination. And there's some really good stuff out there that I can get for stock art, so I think that'll be pretty cool. And I hope you're looking forward to it. I know I am. Mystery Project kind of had to get put on the back burner this week, which I have some pretty aggressive writing goals for it. So that's a little bit rough, but we will be catching up with that very soon. And I'm excited to get back to it. In the meantime, what I've been working on heavily this week is Everyday Pirates. It is more than half done. I think I hit the 5,000 word mark just before recording this today. And the goal is 7,500 words, so I don't have very much left to go. I hope to be finishing it probably tomorrow would be ideal on the first draft, and then I'll spend some time reading through it, tightening things up. I will share the first draft with the fine folks at Evil Genius Games in case they have anything they want to tweak. I'm really excited about ship combat. That's coming along really nicely. It's based on the system that Brian developed for Intergalactic Heroes. So it's a really cool system that involves everybody on the crew, which will be the heroes, in events that are taking place on the ship. It involves both combat scenarios where you're like ship-to-ship combat, but also something like the ship is facing a big storm, or you're trying to run down a fleeing ship that's trying to get away from you, which would be a prelude to combat. So these things kind of can be handled by ship events. It's a pretty cool system. It is based on the original chase system as well, kind of a derivative of that, but it doesn't use chase points necessarily, but sometimes it does. Anyway, each ship event is kind of a unique scene that the characters can participate in different things going on the ship in order to help achieve overall success. And then if failures happen, it gives the opposing ship or the opponent's ship an opportunity to do something bad to the players, like shoot their ship with cannons, or catch up and board them, or escape off into the sunset. Whatever it happens to be, bad things can happen if those events go poorly, and good things happen if the events go well. So they're pretty cool. I think you'll like them. They create a good cinematic environment. It's a pretty neat system, and I've added some of my own twists to it in this version. There are differences, so some tasks within an event will only be available if you have certain qualities on your ship, certain kinds of weapons or sails or different things like that. The stats of the ship will come into account. So if you're trying to flee away and you're on a really fast ship, you will definitely have an advantage over trying to flee on a very slow ship. And likewise, if you're trying to catch a very slow ship, it will be considerably easier if you're in a fast ship, etc. The wind direction can matter a little bit, although that was going to play a bigger part. But the more I thought about it, in most of the scenarios, the ships are traveling in the same direction. There are a couple exceptions. And so that kind of, they're both going to be using the wind to the same advantage, although some ships take better advantage of the wind than others. Some things like that. So there will be some variations with wind speed, but it's going to play a little bit less of a role than I thought it might, just because of the dynamics of each of these encounters. But there are some situations where having the wind behind your sails is going to give your ship an edge over the other ship, so planning the encounters ahead of time can matter. We've also got elements like ship morale, so the morale of your crew can affect the crew's roles during a ship event. So if you don't have any player characters that are good at a specific thing, but you have members of the crew that are good at that, then they'll be able to participate in the ship encounters as well. Although the crew can only participate once during a given task, no matter how many of them there are. So there are some limits to that. And they can be inspired or helped by the player characters who can lead the crew, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of things to consider just to give players lots of options, both mechanically and story-wise, as to what's going on when we're doing stuff with ships, so that it feels like you're all together as part of a team participating in the encounter, rather than just as individual characters doing their own thing like you normally have in a combat scenario. So anyway, I think it's a lot of fun, and a lot of different design elements have gone into it from everybody who's worked on Everyday Heroes, so I think it'll be really cool. Also, I'm nearly done with the career path for pirates, which is a big part of generating pirate characters, or just any sailor character. It works for that. Themed on pirates, but based on sailors. One of the cool things that I put together was if you want to be a ship's doctor, ship's surgeon, they have a cool little talent, which does two things. The one thing that does, which is more normal, is you can patch up somebody at 0 hit points and kind of get them back in the fight. They get a hit point and a little bit, like 1d4 temporary hit points, but just to give you just enough to kind of get back into combat if you want to. But also, later on that night, during a long rest, you can give that character the peg leg, hook hand, or eye patch pirate perks, which are part of the career path. So you can start with those if you want. But then if another character gets badly injured during a fight, and you as the ship's doctor bring them back up, you can give them one of those perks if they want to take it, and to make your character all the more piratey as you had a close encounter with death, right? So lots of little mechanics I'm trying to bake in there to just give a little good pirate feel, and I think this supplement's going to be a lot of fun. Speaking of which, Evil Genius Games just put out another supplement, so I keep forgetting to kind of shout out to the other things people are doing, which I did in my initial videos, and I forgot about that. So they've got Lost Worlds. Now I'm going to forget exactly what it's called, but basically Lost World Heroes, something like that. Anyway, it's for, your journey to the center of the Earth, Dinosaur Planet, Hollow Earth, all that kind of stuff is in there. It's pretty cool. I haven't read through it in detail, but it looks pretty neat, so definitely check it out on Sidekick if you get the chance. And speaking of Evil Genius Games, our company, SigTrent Games, got a new contract from Evil Genius Games in order to do layout for 3 print books that are coming out, which have to do with printing Sidekick adventures and supplements in a nice little book format. So those can be out in stores and broaden the audience for Everyday Heroes. So I think it's a great project. I'm happy that I can participate with it and provide those services. So Anne's going to be working on those, and I'm really excited. We're doing some work to just kind of refine our process, since we're also doing the layout for Shotgun Fantasy. It's going to dovetail really well together, that kind of work, and get our own processes for doing books for both print and for PDF put together so that we can do those efficiently in the future. Which is a big part of my overall plan for SigTrent Games, is to develop processes to make the work of producing books simple, quick, easy, and efficient, because that's kind of what I'm about on the business side of things instead of the creative side. All right, Mystery Project. Oh, yeah, I talked about that. Anything else going on? No, there's just a lot happening right now, so it's a little bit of a jumble in my brain. Anyway, let's move on to our game design tip of the week. And a little bit of a simple one this time. Again, very busy, so I had to keep this one short. But it is about Crunch versus Fluff. So what is Crunch and Fluff? Crunch is basically the rules portion of an RPG. It is the game mechanics and the tactical and strategic parts of the game, as it were. And then the fluff part is the role-playing, the storytelling, the world-building, all the things that don't necessarily need mechanics, but are part of the game master and player's storytelling powers and experience, right? So these are, to me, the 2 key elements that make up a role-playing game and have a distinct characteristic in and among themselves, right? So you know Crunch when you see it, and you know Fluff when you see it. And some games lean very heavily towards the storytelling and fluff side, and some games lead very heavily towards the crunchy side. And I happen to like both. Let's talk a little bit about how this came up, because I played Champions, which is a hero system game, this week. So we got together to play, and had a kind of an experience that was not a bad experience, right? But turned the wheels a little bit about game design is the reason I came up with this topic. So we had done a lot of character building. We'd been making characters for like 3 weeks, and then we had our first session 0 where we refined and worked on the characters some more and did a little test combat so everybody could figure it out. So there's 3 players in this group. It's a pretty small group. 2 of us are kind of game mechanic, I don't know, we call it ADHD types or autistic types or whatever. So me and another one of the players really dove into the character building, dug through the character systems in great detail, trying to figure out how to make our character concepts come to life and to make good, effective characters in the game, right? One of the other players is a little bit more of a fluff player, right? So, you know, perfectly happy to engage with the mechanics, perfectly smart person and everything, but just doesn't have that sort of crazy laser focus that's going to help you dig through a giant 700-page rule book full of every superhero power you can possibly imagine and every kind of variation possible on it, and then distill that down to a particular character vision that you have. It's just a very obsessive process, and it takes a lot of work. And for them, it was very hard. They started out with a character from the Game Master, and then they just kind of tried to change that, and then added some more things. So we spent a lot of the time of the session 1, kind of doing session 0, part 2, trying to help them get their character together. And did we fully succeed? No, not really. There's still a lot of things that they needed to adjust on the character, both to make it effective, to meet their vision, and to work within the game mechanics, right? So these trifectas. So very crunchy experience. And the end result was we had one scenario. It was basically a combat in a museum where we were guarding some treasure. Some bad guys, supervillains, came in looking for one of the 3 heroes in the party. Meanwhile, some thieves were trying to, at the same time, use that as a distraction to rob some ancient artifacts. All 3 of our characters are kind of history themed, so it made sense that we were all in this new museum exhibit. And so we had a fight, and we did a conclusion to the fight. And so the whole session was probably about 3 hours. And, you know, an hour and a half to 2 hours were spent dealing with kind of character issues. And then, you know, the remaining hour to an hour and a half, I'm not sure, was this combat scenario. And I think probably during the combat scenario, I want to estimate I spent between 1 and 2 minutes playing my character, right? Saying what I was going to do in combat or role-playing what was going on at the time. Because the game mechanics are so complex, my character was not particularly involved in fighting, but I was doing things kind of in the environment to control the bad guys, to keep them from leaving the building with the jewelry, to kind of antagonize the 2 groups against each other, to do stuff like that, right? I did punch somebody at one point just because I had an extra action towards the end of the fight, and I wanted to see what would happen mechanically speaking, right? But I didn't engage in a whole lot of game mechanics, and so my turns were very short, as where the other players were really brawling and fighting with the bad guys. And each bad guy's turn, the NPCs are done up like a full character, so they've got all their point values and complexities and all that intricacy to them. And so their turns took a while to each do, and our characters' turns took a long time, and because none of us are super familiar with the rules, we had to engage in that. Long story short, it took a long time, and I had very little role-playing time. Now, I enjoyed myself quite a lot because I was engaged in all that character building and helping the other players figure out the rules and kind of helping adjudicate, you know, during the combat and stuff. So I was very involved in the gameplay. But the RPG play, the fluff side of it, was incredibly minimal. Anyway, so that's the experience I had, and it really made me think about this topic. And it kind of highlights the fact that I might see this as a critique of the hero system in the Champions game, that the crunch so took over this gaming session that the fluff was reduced to just kind of a tiny little bit of part of the whole experience. I still had a good time. And that's because I like crunchy stuff. I also love fluffy stuff. And I play games that have very minimal rules and are almost all about freeform storytelling. Stuff like Toon or Mechanical Corners, which I played online with some people, you know, like as a live play. And I love those kinds of games as well. So I'm happy either way, so long as something interesting is happening, right? And this was definitely fun and interesting for me. So I think it's important that when you are making a game or thinking about a game, even if, as we'll get to it, there is some synergy between Crunch and Fluff, you need to think about the game experience that you want players to have and the kind of players that you're going to have in your game, and whether they like a really crunchy game with a lot of tactics or they like a lot of fluff and to just get to the action and the storytelling, right? And you need to keep in mind what that target is so that your game will deliver on that. If you like a rich storytelling game and you fill it with complex mechanics, you're going to defeat your purpose. And likewise, if you want a really good tactical mechanical experience and your book is filled with poetry, you're going to kind of turn off the audience that you are trying to reach and the people who are going to really love your game, right? So have in mind a kind of a ratio, and it's not like a word count ratio, it's really a kind of a touchy-feely thing, but how much you want to feel the crunchy side or the role-playing side, or whether you want those evenly split, and whether you want them kind of mixed together or whether you want them in sort of in separate categories, right? So, all right, so let's think about that a little bit and talk about some of the things that you can do beyond deciding which way you are going to go. And that really important thing is to signal to your audience what they're going to get, both in the marketing for your game when you talk about the game to the public and say what this game is, and in the emails that you write and the messaging that you put together. If it is a mechanically crunchy, tactical, rich game, you want to tell, in a way, the audience to expect that kind of thing. You say, oh, this is a game with rich tactical options, deep character creation. You don't want to say it's a super crunchy game, right? That some people will definitely appeal to, and other people will be like, I don't know that I like crunch or even know what that is. So you want to talk about the aspects of the game where those mechanics are really interesting and create dynamic play environments, right? So for Champions or something, it is a game where you can make any kind of superhero and have them feel distinct and unique from every other hero. That's one of its strengths. That's what all that crunch is sort of going towards. And so that's the aspect that you would advertise or want to talk about. With the hero system, even more than that, it's like you can play fantasy. It's a universal system. You can play superheroes. You can play martial artists. You can play science fiction. Anything you want, you can do in this game because we have rules for everything, right? And if you're doing a rich storytelling game, you want to talk about the incredible world that you've built. You want to talk about the mechanics that create deep immersion and engagement for players, that kind of thing, that spark the imagination. Something like Daggerheart focuses on that, even though it has plenty of mechanical elements. It's sort of saying, like, this is a good role-playing game that has character building and stuff, but it also focuses heavily on stories. If you see, like, the Cypher system from Monty Cook Games advertised, they really focus on how quick and easy it is to get into the game and make a character, and how immersive the world is going to be, and how flexible the storytelling can be, right? So definitely figure out what angle it is that you're trying to tell people is really great, and focus on that in your messaging. And also in the book itself, in the introduction to the book, when you're introducing elements, all that. So here's some other things that you can do to kind of blend the crunch and the fluff together and maximize the best of both worlds when you want to do that. Not every game should do that, but when you want to. And that's often kind of what I maybe specialize in, since I would say as a designer, I'm more of a crunch guy, but I love fluff too. And so I don't want it to be ignored. I just try to work the two into a tasty blend. So blend thoughtfully. There are times when the clarity of rules are more important than the flavor. So mixing a bunch of cool style and statements in with your rules explanations is often counterproductive, because it just makes the rules harder to understand, and then people are going to spend more time having to read them, and if they don't really like reading rules, that's going to be counterproductive, right? So make sure the clarity is always there, even when you are trying to blend the two. One of the ways that I do blend a lot is the names of abilities. So a talent, like the one I was talking about earlier for the doctor, I think is either like, you're good to go, or I'll fix you right up. I forget what it is, but like, it is a phrase that a doctor might say after they've just hastily stitched a soldier together and sent them back out into the fight, right? Or I have very painfully sawed off your leg and installed a stump on it, right? It's the sort of ironic gallows humor sort of a statement. And so by naming the mechanic that, I instantly tell the player what this is about, when it might be used, right? They have a real world anchor to it, and it's just like 3 or 4 words, right? And then the mechanic that's written after that name can just be mechanics. I don't have to explain what's going on. People are going to implicitly understand the story of the mechanics because I have described it really well with just a good name. So that's one of the ways you can really tighten that in. Now, occasionally you're going to write a mechanic, and for whatever reason, you can't just with the name totally communicate what's going to happen. This happens a lot with magic stuff because we don't live in a magical world, and so we don't intuitively understand what is involved in casting a spell or doing something else or reading a magical aura. So in those cases, the mechanics might have to be mixed with a statement, an initial statement. In order to soothe your enemy's souls, you have to do this, and then here's the mechanic for it, right? So you might need a sentence that kind of sets up what the mechanic is simulating because you don't intuitively understand the situation, right? So these are 2 techniques that I use in Everyday Heroes to blend in a sense of storytelling with the mechanics while keeping the mechanics nice and clear and easy to understand and separate from that fluffy part. Another thing is when you're having crunch in a game, you want to make that crunch very accessible. Now, this is something where I think the hero system maybe, or at least the hero system core book, doesn't do a great job, probably because it's already 600 and some odd pages. So they don't have any more room to gently guide you through all these mechanics. That's just a product desire, not necessarily making it bad, but I think it's a little bit of a weakness in the marketplace, you might say. Because it just keeps it only accessible to the existing hardcore fans. But I believe strongly in making crunch accessible by doing things like describing why these rules exist. Why is this rule here? Describing how you use these rules in a game. So, for instance, in the Everyday Pirates, or Pirate Heroes, now I'm going to forget which one it is, we introduce the ship event combat by saying, look, here's what this mechanic is, and then I say, here's how you use it. Like, be sure these mechanics are meant to create a vivid scene, not just to be dice rolls. So be sure as a game master to be describing what is happening when the captain is making a piloting check. What is happening when, I'm going to forget the boatswain is impelling the rowers to row harder in order to catch the enemy vessel, right? Set the stage, describe the scenes, just a sentence or two to make sure we know the context that these dice rolls are happening in, and then go on to describe the success or failure result. You know, the crew is out of sync on their rowing, and so you're not catching up with the enemy. Or a success, like everybody is syncing together, rowing really hard, and the enemy is drawing closer and closer, right? Turn those mechanics into a description, make the role make sense within the story. And so I just have a little paragraph that kind of lays that out for the game master to remind them, not to teach them, but to remind them that that is the game intent, and that's going to be better for play. All right. So, and that's just a way to make crunch more accessible. Another example might be if you have a class and they have a certain power, and you think to yourself, well, it's not necessarily super obvious why this is here, then have a little text block explaining how it works, right? And ramp in the character. Another example is in the core rulebook for Everyday Heroes. We have the nice chart that says how complex each class is to play and build as a new player, so that as a new player you can decide how much of a challenge you want to take on, how much crunch you want to have to engage with. And that's really helpful for new people and gives them a nice little soft ramp into the crunchy side of the game. All right. Finally, and this is about the fluff side of things, make your fluff meaningful. Ask yourself, why is this in the book? What advantage is it giving to players or game masters? One of the critiques that I would have of, say, let's see, the World of Darkness stuff back in the 90s, which I generally think are incredibly cool game products and cool games. But some of the books are filled with sort of like vampire poetry and stuff, some of which is very useful because it helps you understand the world building, the attitude of the different clans towards each other, the plight of being an undead vampire, et cetera, et cetera. And some of them felt like they were just there so that the writer could write some cool poetry and feel good about themselves. And, I do think writers should write for themselves to a degree. I think if it takes away from the quality of the product, that's not so great. If it's just there for kind of your own entertainment, I'm not as supportive of it as I am if you can write it for your own entertainment and have it serve a purpose for the players and a game master both. So I like to think about that service and the mission that the fluff is serving first, and then just to make that as good as I can and to put my creative heart and soul into that piece of storytelling. So that's how I like to do that. And I think you can absolutely achieve both. You just have to keep both things in mind and not let yourself get carried away by your just kind of your own impulses and desires for what you feel like writing. Okay. One way to get around that is to just indulge yourself and then cut it down to just the parts that are actually useful and meaningful for the players and game masters. All right. So I think that's enough crunch versus fluff. Let's move on to what I've been playing this week and what's going on in my life. First of all, No Man's Sky continues to plague me with its addictive qualities. I have played less of it this week than last week, so that's good, but it is still rattling around my brain at every thought. I met a new like species or race within the game, these kind of outlaw robot guys, and got involved in a quest line for them, which was a lot of fun. I pretty much finished the main quest lines in the game. You never really truly finish them, but you do reach kind of a climactic point. And so I got to those climactic points and all the three main stories that the game presents you with. I built myself a cool Corvette, which is the system for building customized ships. So you can find cool starships to fly around in that are pre-made by the game, but you can also find parts and build your own. And so I did build one that looks pretty neato and serves my purposes as kind of a traveling base, so I was very happy with that. And I started finding some settlements. So at some point in the game, you can find little settlements, and you can manage them and help them upgrade their stuff and make money and make little decisions for them about who is allowed in or if somebody commits a crime. Kind of, the town mayor, I guess. And eventually, I guess you could have multiple settlements. It's just another thing to play around with in a giant sandbox game. So I did a bit of that. And with every new little system and thing that I discover, my obsession grows. So really cool game. I definitely recommend it, but not if you're really busy. All right. As I mentioned, I played Champions this week and had a good time with that. And that's about it for gaming this week. Nomad Ann's Twitch channel. She's been playing all kinds of different things this week. Phasmophobia, a little bit. No Man's Sky, of course. She's also pretty obsessed with it, as I am. Played a game called Dagon, which is based on H.P. Lovecraft, sort of a walking simulator story contemplation game, which kind of left Anne in some deep thoughts about the nature of the original work from H.P. Lovecraft and what it means. She played a game called Observation Duty, in which you kind of control a camera and you're looking for strange phenomena, supernatural phenomena that are going on in an environment. So you're trying to spot the differences between what should be there and what is there so that you can just track down the ghosts. I don't know much of the context beyond that. I have watched her play a little bit. And a game called Crime Scene Cleaner, which I got for her for birthday one time, in which you're a guy who cleans up crime scenes. So that's a pretty cool game. She played that as well. So lots of stuff going on at Nomad Ann's Twitch channel. I definitely recommend you check it out if you like watching people play games. All right, life in general. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm having fun. I got pretty good energy. I've been working very hard. I don't really have a lot else going on in my brain. I did see the new hardware that Steam's putting out. So if you don't know, they're making a new game controller. They're making kind of like a console version. It's a Linux box, but it's going to run Steam and most of the Steam games. And that looks really cool piece of hardware. And probably the thing that looks most interesting to me, a new headset for like 3D gameplay and immersive stuff. I have a Quest Oculus, I think, which is pretty fun to play around with, which is a little bit of a hassle to kind of get into, upgrade the software and set up. But Valve really promises that this thing is super comfortable to wear, has pretty good performance, and is also going to be a lot more plug and play. You just put it on your head and connect, and you're ready to go. And you're not going to spend a lot of time fussing with the software and everything. So that would be really cool, and it would make that kind of experience better. I liked using the Oculus Quest, especially to watch movies. It's really a neat experience to watch movies on a headset like that. It feels like a gigantic screen, even though they're tiny little screens. But perceptive-wise, it's a really immersive. I think it might be really interesting to try working in that environment, but the one that I have is a little too big and clunky to sit on my head for a long period of time. I think one movie is about as much as I could handle. And I will spend 6 to 8 hours working. So I'm really interested in that stuff. Now, of course, I got to make some money in order to afford those things if I want to get them, but I think those are pretty cool. Also, the little box could be a good introduction into Linux. I've always avoided it because I've never really had much need for it. Windows is fine by me. I'm not really picky when it comes to operating systems. Can be a pain in the butt sometimes, but generally speaking, it's all right. But I've always kind of wanted to get introduced to Linux, but I just sort of needed a good reason to do it, something practical and or something fun. In this case, it would be something fun. So I'm thinking about it. We'll see what happens. I won't be grabbing these things day one or anything like that. I rarely do that, but I'm going to keep my eye on them. And if they don't have any problems, I can get a reasonable deal, and I've got the money, may spring on some of those. We'll see. I'm very excited about the company getting another contract, specifically to do something other than just me writing. Getting Anne involved in the business and making money in SigTrent games is very important to the long-term plan. So I hope to get more contract work doing layout, and this will be a good demonstration of our ability to do that. And to provide other kinds of services to people who want to publish their games, and design services to people who want to improve their work, and consultation services to other people who want to use our efficient methods, right? Whatever that happens to be. So it's kind of a good week for seeing that kind of growth, and that gets me excited for the possibilities in the future beyond just me designing games. All right. Well, I hope you guys have good opportunities for your future. I hope Thanksgiving, which is coming up, is going to be great for everybody, and you have a lovely feast with friends and or family, or you just have a really quiet day at home playing fun games that you really enjoy, whatever it is that makes you thankful and feel good. That's what I'm hoping for you. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.